Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. I'm not going to say thank God it's Monday because Mondays usually suck. Russ, start us off with the pre-show.
Don't your Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays suck too?
Yeah, pretty much.
So 35 years ago today, the New York Mets won that Game 6 against the Boston Red Sox. Could be the most famous game in World Series history now. Mm-hmm. There's so much that's been written about it. Poor Bill Buckner, and we could go through all that. But I'll just give you my accounting of the way it was for me, a lifelong Mets fan. So I was over my girlfriend's house, who's now my wife, and we were watching the game. And when they were losing and it was about the seventh inning, my father-in-law couldn't take it. He was like, I got to go to bed. He needed a sedative. Like, it was just, he couldn't bear to watch them lose.
Is he a Mets fan?
Yes.
Was the sedative in those days Johnny Walker Red?
No.
Byron Walker.
Whatever he took, but he had to go to bed. And then, so my wife and I were watching it, and she had to work early. I had to work early. She was like, turn the TV off. Just turn it off. And I'm like, no, they've come back all year. I am going to stay to the bitter end. They may come back. And it was one time where, it really paid off. You never knew it was going to pay off that way. And it was a weird year because, like, the Mets were the best team in baseball. Like, they should have been able to run through the whole playoffs easily, but it didn't work out that way for them. Houston gave them everything they had. And so it was a year that by the time the World Series rolled around and it was clear that the Red Sox weren't going to be an easy team, that Met fans were nervous in that game. And I got to imagine a lot of people probably walked away from that game. And, they came back and won. They still had to win a Game 7. But it really was unbelievable the way things unfolded. And I'll just never forget it. Like, of any sporting event that I've ever watched that affected me because it was one of my teams, there's no way I could ever forget it.
Kevin, you have to put yourself in my shoes as a Yankee Cardinal fan in 1986. Seeing the Mets, who were the big rival for the Cardinals, and the Red Sox, who were the big rival for the Yankees, it was like choosing sides in the Iran-Iraq war. It was basically like you wanted mutually assured destruction. I used to say, "What are you hoping for out of the Red Sox-Mets series?" And I said a mid-air collision because I didn't want either one of them to win.
I think the Americans took sides in the Iraq Iran.
The picture of Donald Rumsfeld with Saddam Hussein sort of gives you an indication.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's and you know what, the World Series that will be starting on Tuesday, I don't have such a problem right now. I am the biggest friggin' Atlanta Braves fan you could possibly imagine. I hope they win in 3.
Sadly, I'm going to have to be rooting for the Braves too here, and I'll be writing about the Braves. I do think they have a pretty good chance. I think the biggest chance the Braves have is the 1-2 combination of Morton and Fried. Now, Fried didn't play great in LA, but also maybe he psyched himself out because he was a huge Koufax fan. His dad was a Koufax fan. He's a lefty. He's Jewish. He's in Dodger Stadium. Maybe it was all too much for him. But he was great leading up to that. And so the 1-2 combo could be what the Arizona Diamondbacks, what they did with Schilling and Johnson. So we'll see. I mean, but Eddie Rosario, they literally got Eddie Rosario for a washed up Pablo Sandoval. And they got cash back with Eddie Rosario to cover this. Like, it's one of the
cash
most
back,
unbelievable
like
trades.
a commercial. I love that.
Yeah, it was an unbelievable trade.
It's like the Phil Rizzuto money store commercial. No, but I mean, imagine, Russ, if Acuna was healthy.
Oh yeah,
but
they might not have traded for Rosario if Acuna was healthy.
But you could say the same thing about the Astros. Imagine if Verlander was healthy.
Right.
So, yeah.
I always poke fun at you guys just because you have such strong feelings about teams, and I just don't think like that. I never have. I root for my team, but I don't. It doesn't ruin my day. If the other team, does well. But I saw an episode of Ted Lasso, and I thought about how ludicrous my position would be to people like Roy Kent. If you remember, there was a scene when he was talking about a possible suitor for the owner of the of the soccer team that he formerly played for. And one of the things he didn't like about the guy is that he was wishy-washy about whether he liked Manchester United or Arsenal. And he would pick one based – was it Arsenal? I can't remember now.
I can't either.
But anyway, and he'd pick it based on how well they were playing, not because he had any allegiance to this. And Roy Kent simply could not understand that. Well, Roy Kent and Russ, and it's you. Roy Kent, that's just how he viewed it.
Except I don't say everything is shit, but otherwise, yeah, probably is.
No, shite, not shit, shite.
Yeah.
Roy Kent, I will say this about Roy Kent. He revolutionized the in-studio analyzing.
Analysis. Yeah.
Analysis,
I think he's one of the greatest characters ever created. The Neanderthal man who's really got a heart of gold, and I mean, it's terrific. But I do find myself, particularly in playoff games, and this is be so foreign to you, but I develop my allegiances once the game gets going, and it's not. Sometimes I change. Like I'm more interested in having a competitive, good game. So, in other words, like if I'm rooting for a team and they're starting to blow it the other way, I'll start rooting for the other team because I just want a competitive game.
There are some games I'll do that with. The Super Bowl, because my team's never in the Super Bowl, so I do that with the Super Bowl.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just sort of rooting for kind of an entertaining, fun game. So.
Whereas if I'm rooting against a team, I want them to lose like $6 billion to nothing. Just stomp on them. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, October 25th, 2021.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I don't want to be someone that Michael Jello's team is playing. So.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with this because we've mentioned the fact that they were struggling, and we've mentioned the possibility of their head coach being in trouble, but it's really now gotten to the point where the Chicago Blackhawks situation may be coming to a boiling point. I mean, I don't know whether Jeremy Colleton's going to be fired within hours or not, but they're 0-5-1. They have the worst record in the league. They're worse than the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are 0-4-1, so they're ahead of them in the standings in the Central Division. And this is a team, Kevin, that added Marc-Andre Fleury, added Seth Jones, Jonathan Taves coming back. A lot of expectation that they were going to be a playoff team. In fact, I picked them to finish fourth in the Central. And they are, I mean, right now, the one game that they really, I thought, played well was the game they lost to the Islanders, where Sorokin sort of stoned them. But they lose 6-3 to the Detroit Red Wings, and, things are not happy in the Windy City right now.
No, I watched that game last night, and this is how bad things are going, and really an indication of how bad it is going for the Blackhawks. On the day before the game on Saturday, they had 3 players on COVID protocol. They had Carpenter, they had Patrick Kane, and they had someone else.
Was it Connor Murphy, I think?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Anyway, whoever it was, but 2 of them turned out to be a false positive, but you can guess that the one with the false positive was not Patrick Kane. It turns out, and of course, he was out of the game. Jonathan Taves has no points. The rust is on his game from the missed opportunity. And, of course, he scores a goal on a power play goal, and there's a challenge. Now, first of all, it's amazing that the Red Wings were willing to challenge that, because had they blown that challenge, the score would have been 6-4 with plenty of time left, and they would have given Chicago a 5-on-3 power play. But they did that challenge, and of course it was successful. So Taves lost his goal. His only point would have been his only point of the season thus far. And obviously that put the nail right in for the Blackhawks, and they were done. Their defensive effort last night was abysmal. Just way too many opportunities, good chances. They're not playing well at all. And I know Kubalik scored a goal, and he just kind of exhaled like it was a relief to get a goal. And they set a new record yesterday for the longest to start the season without ever having a lead. It's over 360 minutes now.
Unbelievable.
Which is hard to believe, even like in the Kyle Calder era when they were horrible. Because we used to send somebody from Sportsology to Chicago. I had somebody there, and they were truly pitiful then. And even then, they didn't have this record. But Kev, here's the bigger question. So let's just say for argument's sake, Colleton gets fired. Stan Bowman's up there, and he has to announce the firing. He's going to get destroyed too that day.
Well, yeah, because and it's I've brought this up just from talking to people who've told me that he has been looking for a defenseman so it's not like he didn't know this. He's been working trying to get a defenseman, but there just hasn't anyone out there. And
he's been trying to trade Dylan Strome, and he hasn't been able to find the price tag, the price to come.
Playing them helps your value, though. Just saying.
Yeah, well, they played him yesterday, so
okay.
And I think he got a double minor high sticking penalty.
That'll help his value.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, they're playing really poorly. The Red Wings played 3 consecutive teams that were winless, and they helped 2 of them get their first wins in Calgary and against Calgary and then Montreal. But they refused to help the Blackhawks. And I just think the Blackhawks wouldn't let them help them essentially. So they're playing poorly. The word is in Chicago that they think Colton is in trouble. So,
well, let me ask this question, Kev, because we know Stan Bowman is tied in with USA Hockey. We know probably, I don't know whether Colton is a player's coach or somebody who's a hard ass, but usually whenever they fire a coach, they bring in the exact opposite of what that coach is. Would a guy like John Tortorella be a fit in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to consider him. I know for a fact that Seth Jones liked him.
Mm-hmm. And that would be important. Be important.
Yeah, so I think you'd have to consider him to be sure. He's the best coach out there. There's no doubt about it. He gets the most out of his players, and that's kind of what you really want when you're at a talent disadvantage, which they are on defense. You got to try to get someone who can make that defense play better. And, we've seen, like, I remember when the Devils got to the Stanley Cup final against the Kings that year, and the following year, and as a training camp exercise, I would say to people in the hockey world, name one New Jersey defenseman. Because it was hard, back then they had a bunch of nondescript guys who had reached the final. And I remember Ken Holland saying to me that, he watched that final and he said, he'd always felt like you got to have like a premier defense in order to win. And he said there was nothing premier about New Jersey's defense that year. It was a bunch of hardworking guys epitomized by Bryce Salvador.
Yeah. Andy Green and a few other guys.
Just guys that worked hard, did a good job. They were thorough.
Yeah. The only thing is, there's no statistic right now that you could look at with the Blackhawks that looks good. And Seth Jones is a -9. Even if you bring in Tortorella, they don't have the right personnel to play the Tortorella system. So now he is going to have to sort of play a hybrid system.
The Tortorella system, don't you think Russ is getting guys just to be hard to play against? And you can teach that.
But how do you get Kubalik to be hard to play against? How do you get, there's some guys on that team that they aren't hard to play against, never have been.
Yeah, but I think Tortorella has a history of changing guys and getting them to play his way and people to buy in, and those who don't.
He could change a couple, sure. I don't know if he's going to be able to change that many, though. Like, that's another situation.
But I mean, it's not like they're void of ability to be successful. I mean, there's some very good players on that team.
But they're void. They're definitely devoid of forwards playing enough defense. That was one of the big things I brought up, and you can cure some of that. But I've seen teams, and there's only so much you can do with that.
I mean, they've got Jonathan Taves, who's a Stanley Cup winner. They've got Patrick Kane, who's one of the most competitive players in the league. They've got Tyler Johnson, who was on 2 Stanley Cup.
Tyler Johnson's a shell of himself. He is a shell of himself.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, we were all crowing about how well he played in last year.
He had a moment in the playoffs, but
he looked pretty good 3 months ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like he can't play the game. But so they've
No,
got.
I don't think that's the case. But I just think
Here's-
again, impact guys. Tyler Johnson's got 3 points and he's a -5 too.
Well, here's a bizarre thing too, and I wanted to bring this up because maybe there's some analytics guys who are watching now because I've really kind of come along on analytics like everybody else. I've started to look at them, and there's some things I know right now in Detroit. Hronek has been scratched, and his analytics aren't very good in terms of his. Of course, he isn't very good. There's several analytics and designations where he fails in. I looked up Seth Jones yesterday. How do you think he's doing on Corsi?
This year terrible.
No, he's not.
No.
Look it up. I mean, before yesterday's game.
I know that.
Before yesterday's game, he was at a 51% Corsi.
Okay.
Wow,
that's surprising.
So, I mean, that was before the game. He had another bad game, so he could below. But that was stunning to me because I watched him. He didn't pass the eye test yesterday. He just seemed a little bit lost. So
well, here's something that talks about like chances. So the actual goal differential minus the expected goal differential, and they're -13. You're supposed to be in the positive. That is the team number right now for the Blackhawks. And it looks like that. Like that's a legit stat. Like that's like, what?
I would say it is. I would say the analytics are right on with the Blackhawks.
Well, some potential good news for the Blackhawks, Russ, on their schedule next on Wednesday is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
All right, so let's talk about the Maple Leafs, right? Because
here you go. Russ rubbing his hands with glee.
No, but we have to because now with Freddie Anderson being announced as the starting goalie, it's all coming to this head. And honestly, this is like the Leafs against themselves and against the fans. Like it's just they're fighting all of that. Carolina's fighting nothing. Like Carolina has nothing to worry about but the game. The Leafs have all these other things to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's just
it's
crazy what has built up here out of just a bad start.
As I wrote today for Hockey Buzz, the pressure right now, and it's their own fault, is on the core group of the Maple Leafs. Now, I think not lesser so, but just as much so on Kyle Dubas and on Sheldon Keefe. Kyle Dubas because he stayed with that core group. He backed them. He doubled down, so to speak, on them. And right now, and again, it's 6 games. So anybody who's drawing like ridiculous conclusions, get a life because it's 6 games is not a season. And if the Leafs win the next 2 games and everybody's like, oh my God, they're such a great team. Mm-hmm. But right now, between Mitch Marner, who makes almost $11 million, and Austin Matthews, who makes $11.6 million, and John Tavares, who makes $11 million, you've got 1 goal. And, you can say, well, Matthews was out with the wrist injury and he's only played 3 games and he had a great first game, but the next 2 games he was not really much of a presence. Tavares has 3 points and he's done okay, but usually when Matthews is out, Tavares has stepped up and been much more a center point offensively, and he wasn't. And Marner is the one that everybody's pointing to, Russ. Marner has been brutal. I mean, it's like I think he has psyched himself out. I think he has put more pressure on himself because of everything he heard after the playoffs that he didn't score in 18 straight playoff games, and he's and now he's got 1 point in 6 games, and all this Michigas about.
Okay, all right. If you're going to use Michigas, that's good by you. Tell me what Sheldon Keefe is doing to alleviate that.
Well,
I don't see anything. I think he should put him with Tavares again. That's what I think.
Well, he did in the at the morning skate. He shook up the lines.
Okay.
Bunting is with Matthews and Nylander, and Kerfoot is moved up to the top 6 as I thought it would happen, and he is playing with Tavares and Marner. But Kevin, this is the thing. It's like, I mean, Toronto was a powder keg going into the season because, and people may say, oh, it was another first round loss. It was a first round loss to Montreal in Toronto that, everybody works with a Montreal Canadiens fan and they hate them. And if that person who, they haven't played that team in the playoffs since 1979, and now that person has bragging rights on them until the next time they play Montreal, that means something. That loss was devastating to the Leaf fan base because Montreal is the team they hate the most. And this is a team that has lost in the opening round of the playoffs 5 years in a row, and now they've come out of the gate and they've stumbled. And Mrazek is hurt, and Anderson's 4-0, and Zach Hyman is second in the league with 5 goals scored. I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong with the Leafs so far has.
Yeah, but it's still just a few games.
Correct.
That's the key thing that you got to remember, and they can certainly turn it around. And I think it throws them off that Matthews didn't start the season with them, and that throws everything off. And he still isn't probably where he needs to be. Although I guess he played a really good game against the Rangers. That's what the Rangers told me.
Fantastic game.
Yeah. So, they just don't seem to have anyone going. That's the biggest problem. And it doesn't sound like Campbell was very good in that game against Pittsburgh. I didn't see the game, but
I'll not that I'm part of the Jack Campbell fan club and I don't come to his defense, but of the 5 goals that were scored, 4 of them were bizarre deflections off of hips and shoulders and his own defenseman's skate. He didn't have a particularly strong game, but I can't put the loss on him like I could put the loss on Michael Hutchinson the game before.
Well, I'll tell you this. I saw a video of Sean Avery. Now, you could just dismiss Sean Avery, and that's fine. But it was a completely hating video on Mitch Marner. And, it was almost like Sean Avery was pulling off the worst part of the Leafs fan base, the kind that feels like Marner will never be good. He's overpaid. He doesn't try hard. He's not a real Leaf. He played golf after the playoffs. And Avery put all that together and put in a video. And, everybody's piling on, Kev. They just are.
Played golf after the playoffs. Who doesn't play golf?
Yeah, I know, but they made it a big deal. Mike can speak to
I was gonna say if I've ever seen a blatant video put out just for the purpose of hits. Yep. He's being a professional troll. But excuse me, what the hell was Sean Avery's entire friggin' NHL career? That's all he did. So, why do I expect
his big thing, Kev, was, after they got eliminated, he was on the golf course the next day. It's what we all joke about. Now you're not allowed to do that? It's crazy.
That's what do you always say when you want to dispatch the other team? We want to send them to the golf course.
Right.
And that's where they'll be the next day. That's the way it works. It's like school's out,
people have to understand that the NHL now and the NHL 50 years ago are completely different. For example, Austin Matthews and Frederik Andersen are best buddies. Yesterday, Frederik Andersen hosted Austin Matthews at his new digs in Raleigh because they're both into fantasy football and they were both watching the football games. 50 years ago, if you found out that you were hanging out with the other team's goalie, they would hang you by your neck.
Well, I can tell you a story. There was a plane problem once coming out of New York after a Flyers, I think it was out of New York, after a Flyers Rangers game, and they were on the same flight, and they only had 4 or 5 seats separating the two teams, and they were worried about that flight.
Well, the Sutter brothers wouldn't, when they played each other, wouldn't speak to each other. They wouldn't go and have dinner or anything. That's just the way that, there's, I think the quote from one of them, I think it might have been Brian saying, we'll get together after the season.
Right.
But I heard from Mike Johnson today on Sirius. He had a great explanation. I really feel that way. His explanation was, ever since the playoff loss, the fans have been in a malaise. The team has been in a malaise. Ownership, GM, everybody is in this fog. And he thinks it's still there with the team, that playoff loss, and they're still carrying it with them. And it's hard to disagree with them.
I don't think the fans are in a malaise, Russ. I think the fans are fed up. I think
but that's what happened, though. That they went from being stunned to being angry.
Yes, there's a lot of, and I used this example yesterday because we had Jeff Merrick from Hockey Night in Canada on our Off the Post show. When somebody who's, and Steve Dangle he's a broadcaster, but he's on Sportsnet and he's a genuine Leaf fan. When he goes out and he's doing his videos and he is expressing just complete and utter frustration and like, what do you expect of this team? Screw them, that type of thing. That reflects what's going on with the fan base. They are fed up. They're like tired of waiting. There's like, okay, when is this team supposed to friggin' win? And you could see it on the faces during the broadcast. Kyle Dubas shaking his. I have the video on my blog. Kyle Dubas shaking his hand. Sheldon Keefe looking up to the air. Mitch Marner breaking his stick along against the bench. And the fans looking pissed off because they drove all the way down to Pittsburgh to watch that piece of crap.
Yeah, but the problem I have with all that is and when it almost becomes self-fulfilling. But if the fan base could have their way, like if we took a vote of all 100 million of them, or how many Maple Leaf fans there are,
right?
Like, what would they have them do right now? Would they have them start over because this team can't do it? Would they trade Marner for something? Would they what would the vote be?
I think what frustrated them more than anything, Kev, was that at the end of the season, Dubas backed.
Yeah, but what would they do now? Like that's
right now,
like what would you have them do?
Well, right now you can't do anything because you're locked into the salary cap. It's impossible.
No. I think, Mike. From what I've seen on Twitter right now, I think they would fire Sheldon Keefe if the fans had.
Yeah, and how brilliant would that be to fire?
But it doesn't matter. We're not talking about brilliance.
Yeah, I'm just asking you, what if we had a vote, what would they want to do?
I think they would fire the coach.
No, I think they would. I think they'd want to fire Dubas, which would have no impact on the team at all.
Well, what I would tell them is that may or may not have impact.
Right.
That's the way it works.
I had somebody suggest that they should fire Dubas and they should hire Jim Rutherford because Jim Rutherford would go in there and trade people. But this is not. This is I know he's done it in the cap era, but
it's different now. When you're paying guys this much and you do have a core,
it's harder to trade those.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to trade them. You can't just simply break it up. It's easy to say, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I think like in this case, the fan base is a detriment simply because I think it becomes self-fulfilling. The more you talk about it, the more the angst you get. I mean, frustrated. Like, it's not like the Maple Leafs, want to be bad. It's not like they're not trying to do something.
Right.
And in this case, when you're only 6 games in, I mean, I'm sure that's unneeded pressure. I mean, it'd be different if we were halfway in the middle of the season,
right?
So
not to say that tonight, if they beat Carolina, it'll be a cure-all. But if they lose and they lose badly to Carolina, the course of booze and the angst on Twitter will just it'll reach a higher level, Russ.
Well, the Hurricanes are going to tweet stuff that's incendiary too. They are.
What was that?
Is Keefe really on the hot seat?
No, I don't think so because they just extended him. They just signed him to a 2-year extension.
Yeah, but if you remember, Mike, I asked Jeff, do you think after 20 games Keefe could be on the hot seat? And he said, yeah, he did.
Yeah, after 20, but not after.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying there is a point where he could be on the hot seat regardless of him getting extended.
Yeah, I mean the point that Jeff made was that Kyle Dubas has had one coaching decision in terms of fired Babcock. He thinks he would get another one before they ended up going that direction. So let me get this in before Eck joins us because I don't want to have Eck doing the Mr. Bird. Ilya Sorokin has recorded consecutive shutouts for the New York Islanders, who are, playing pretty well on the road. And I said, Russ, that the key to their season would be to at least be over 500 when they finally went to the UBS Center at Belmont or whatever the hell the name of the place is. But Sorokin, in the absence of Varlamov, has played pretty well. And I mean, the Islanders are. I mean, they're doing what I think most people expected.
Yeah, no, they've definitely come out of it looking good. Except the worry is of Islander fans, and it's legit. how many games are you going to play Sorokin until you play Corey Schneider? Now, they only have one more game, and then apparently they're off for a bunch of days before they have to go back on the road. So that'll help them in that quest. But they have yet to play Corey Schneider. It's almost like they're afraid to, and they're just going to keep playing Sorokin.
Well, if they were going to play,
there could be a toll to pay on that.
If they were going to play Corey Schneider, wouldn't you think that they would have played him against Arizona?
Yeah, but they didn't. So there could be a toll to pay. Look, they're going to make the playoffs. That's why I keep telling all the fans.
I think they're looking around and seeing that Metropolitan and seeing how good the teams are. Even the Columbus Blue Jackets are better than anyone anticipated.
I said there could be 5 coming out. I really meant it.
No, but I keep warning my readers. I want you to go and look this up and tell me that I'm not right about this. When you have situations like the Metropolitan, you never get 5 because you beat each other up.
There's always a first time. That's what I'll tell you.
There always is, but their records will be down because they will beat each other.
I mean,
what happens is when you get 5 is when you have teams that are at the top that are very, very good, and you have teams at the bottom that are not good. That's when you get.
You're going with history though, and this could be just an unprecedented year too. Like it could.
Yeah. Now the only thing that would defeat that is if the Metropolitan just beats everyone else.
Right, and that's what I thought was going to happen.
The majority of their games are within the division.
I know.
So I've got readers that say the same thing, and I say it doesn't work that way.
I mean, right now, Philadelphia is 2-1-1, and because they played 4 games, they're in last place in the division.
I know
it's going to be crazy, and the records are not going to be, like the Florida Panthers are going to have a great record, because
I looked at them live, Kev, the other day, and then I was in their room. I haven't written about them yet, but I'm about to write about them, and they're not missing anything. There's not one element on that team that they are lacking. Like we always say to some teams, hey, if they get to the playoffs, they'll be tough. That's what I believed about the Canadians, but they still had to get to the playoffs, right? This team is not going to struggle at all.
Yeah, the one thing I would say that could help is if Toronto does have an off season. Like if they kind of bump along and they don't beat teams and they let the Red Wings beat them here and there, and
Sabres.
Yeah. I mean, then possibly you could see it, but it would take because the teams are still weak. Even Ottawa, who I love their other, their talented prospects, but there's not enough of them.
No, it's interesting. The Panthers still beat the Flyers pretty easily, and they were 0 for 7 on the power play.
And Ottawa's so weak up the middle that when Shane Pinto got hurt, they had to trade for Dylan Gambrell because they're just decimated up the middle.
Yeah, and I don't know. Detroit's better, but they're still not they're not Boston good or Florida good or Tampa.
But we should talk about the game from Lucas Raymond because we've talked a lot about Raymond, and it's funny. In their draft year, I put Holtz just 1 or 2 spots ahead of Raymond. But when I wrote about Raymond early this year before the season began, I felt like he took a step that Holtz hasn't taken yet. It doesn't mean they won't both be intersecting at some point and one could still be better than the other. But right now he's at a good point, and it's almost like the rest of Detroit fans knew what he was.
Yeah.
It's almost like the rest of the league's fans are just discovering him now.
The one thing I would point out, and I think that he's been terrific, but rookies don't come up and get top power play minutes, first line minutes. Mm-hmm. You don't start out with Dylan Larkin and Tyler Bertuzzi as your line mates, and you don't end up with Tyler Bertuzzi's playing the best hockey of his career. Mm-hmm. So he's had really good opportunities. Now he's taking advantage of those. But there's some things he hasn't recorded a single hit yet. Mm-hmm. He's been they've tried to run him out of the buildings a couple of times now. Mr. Kachuk took a 2-hand slash on him, so people are starting to notice him now, and he's going to have to face that. Now, I think he's been unbelievable, but I'm just saying there are some things to be concerned about. I would say that as good as Lucas Raymond has been, and he's been off the charts good.
Yeah.
To me, Morris Snyder is even better.
Oh yeah, he's been great. I've been watching him.
he can help you in so many different ways. He's a beast. And the one thing that I've noticed is the kid has absolutely zero fear of anyone in any situation. He's just not. You just can't intimidate him. So I've been real impressed. They're 1-2 in the scoring, and we haven't even seen Moritz Seider really sort of spread his wings as a scorer.
No.
Yet. So,
but I think he's also trying to hold back a little bit to play the right way.
Yeah. He just happened by happenstance to end up with a team where they're taking a bunch of penalties, and their coach is saying daily, you guys have got to stop taking these aggressor penalties and, putting the team in a hole. So I don't think it's easy for Seider to go just run over people. So he has some penalty minutes, but I think he'll get more as he gets more comfortable with the idea. And I think he's going to, run some people over. But I saw a couple of guys just get right in his face, and Seider just looked at him like, I won't do anything now, but I will at some point. So, he's a very, very poised, tough player who's highly skilled. And Lucas Raymond is already one of the better quotes on the team too. If he's a very well-spoken kid, very comfortable. So he's going to be a terrific player, and I expect to see Joe Valeno up at some point. The problem they have is where, if you're going to bring him up, he's playing front line in the AHL, top line minutes, and I think they'd prefer him having doing that than play on the fourth line in Detroit. So,
whenever an anniversary comes up, I always say, where was I then, or how long ago was it? It makes me feel old, and this one made me feel really old. October 25th, 1991, 30 years ago today, the blockbuster deal between the Buffalo Sabres and the New York Islanders that sent Pierre Turgeon, Benoit Hogue, Uwe Krupp, and Dave McElwain to the Islanders for Pat LaFontaine, Randy Hillier, and Randy Wood.
I remember that deal. I hated Benoit Hogue. I was happy to see him leave.
Russ, I was at Buffalo State.
I kept saying it, but it's true. I don't care.
Hate is such a strong emotion. I'm trying to think whether I ever hated anybody. In sport.
You did. There was somebody who bugged you at the bus stop when you were a kid, and I guarantee you,
in real life, I'm sure I did. I'm talking about sports. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people I've come across, but just not in sports because they were a player. When I was a kid, I didn't particularly care for Bobby Clark.
There you go. I was with you on that.
Neither did Valerie Harlamoff. But Russ, I was a senior at Buffalo State College, eating a slice of pizza during my lunch break, and it came over the local news that the Sabres had made that trade for LaFontaine. And and somebody said in the chat, up until he had the concussions, which I think were 95 or 96, he was one of the top 3 or 4 players in the NHL. I mean, him and McGillney were an incredible pairing. McGillney scored 76 goals in 93. Him and Solani, and he was great for Buffalo. He was great with Buffalo. But that trade worked out for the Islanders too, because Turgeon got them to a conference final in '93.
I hated Hogue on both teams. I hated him on the Sabres. I hated him on the Islanders, especially.
You hated him on the Leafs. You hated him on everywhere.
No, but he was a 30-goal, 110 pin guy. I hated him.
I'm gonna regret asking you this, but why did you hate him?
Just because he was one of those guys that he would get some goals to beat you, but he was just a cheap shot artist and a dirty player.
See, I hated Daniel Alfredsson because Daniel Alfredsson was just like that. He was, he undercut players. He was the fake throwing of the stick into the crowd in Toronto after Sundin had lost the grip on his stick. Like he was a great player. He's definitely a Hall of Famer, but I think Leaf fans hated him with a passion.
And why did you hate Gretzky? Just for being Gretzky?
I see I haven't been here, and then the show's about who we hate, Mike.
Yeah. Well, Just curious why you hated Gretzky.
1993.
Okay. All right.
I'm too
Hi,
bright.
how
I
you doing?
don't know why I'm so bright. I don't know why. I'm kind of.
That's fine.
So what were we talking about? People we hate.
Just Benoit Hogue, I hated him.
It was the anniversary of the Turgeon LaFontaine deal.
Yes.
Let me continue.
And basically, where we were at is it had ruined Mike's lunch of pizza. That's where we were.
I'm really sorry I'm late because I really did want to hear about the Detroit-Toronto match. I guess I'm going to have to watch the show later. Did you talk about it yet? The Pittsburgh-Toronto match.
We already did.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Territory, believe me. And we also talked about Ilya Sorokin, Axel. We don't have to talk about him. Sorry.
Yes, I do. I will have. I think one of these days this week on Wednesday I'm releasing my famous Who's Better blogs. Which goes back to the good old.
Yeah, but are you going to do Who's Better, Shesterkin or Sorokin? Because you know who the winner is. It's Shesterkin.
We'll see. We'll have to find out.
We'll see. He's got a .953 save percentage.
Well, right now he's better. I mean, we're not just talking about the first 10 games of the year. We're talking about who's better and who's going to be.
He's been better his whole life.
I thought we were going to talk about COVID.
Well, that was what I was going to bring up.
Okay.
Well, okay. The news that Mackenzie Blackwood has received shot one of the two shots. According to Elliot Friedman, he is that Tyler Bertuzzi is the only player left in the NHL that has not been vaccinated. And I don't know if that's going to change, Kev. You'd know better than I because you're on the Red Wings scene. So it doesn't sound like he's going to. It sounds like he's going to stick to his guns.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I wonder, though, it was such a stark contrast between the Red Wings with Tyler Bertuzzi in Chicago and not with them in Montreal that I wonder how he feels about that. I mean, he's been the ultimate team guy.
Right.
So, I mean, for him to sit on his couch, having a cold one, watching his team get him, humbled, and then for him to be there the next day and contribute mightily to a win against Chicago. I mean, I can't believe that wouldn't impact him. Now, saying that, they have 2 games next Saturday in Toronto and then on Tuesday in Montreal. So the team will go to Toronto and then it will fly to Montreal. So there'll be 2 practices in between he'll miss. He won't catch up with the team until Wednesday in Boston.
That's not good.
He's going to go 6 days without playing. And it's too late for him to do anything about that because he can only get 1 shot.
Right.
Yeah. No.
I mean, you would be 1 shot.
And he has one player. It's one very important player, in the NHL. But it's got to be weird to be the one player in the NHL, like from his perspective. I mean, no matter how much of an outlier you are, in life, to be the only guy of 700 and some players, it's an interesting thing.
And he has to travel independently to Boston, right? I mean, he's not going to go through Canada, obviously, but he basically has to book a flight to Boston and fly there by himself.
Yeah.
So, right. But I wanted to bring this up with the news of Blackwood. But we saw this weekend. I mean, I'll just use the Pittsburgh-Toronto thing as an example. You had Jeff Carter, Chris Letang out with COVID. I saw a number of different reports of a number of different. I mean, it's not blowing up, but it is significant, Kev. And I keep saying to Russ, it's like we're going to get to a point where this volume of players, sometimes it's going to happen probably right before a game. And if that happens, the NHL may have to start postponing games. And we know, I'd like to know what the line of demarcation of how many games get postponed before they say, okay, scheduling wise, we can't do this.
I don't know. Do you really think it's going to come to postponements? I don't think I mean, they're testing every day. So
that's the difference. The NHL is testing. It's either every day or 3 days a week, and the NFL and the NBA are testing once a week.
I mean, it will be. It'll increase in the winter. That's something that always happens with any flu.
Yeah, that's a norm. We know that.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they're going to tell them to, get your farm teams, bring some people up.
I think there's no way they go backwards right now. Unless we're looking at some kind of thing where this suddenly a new strand of COVID is knocking out people.
Well, I mean, there is a situation where I guess you could have it where 2 teams are playing each other, or one team's in the city, the other team's coming back, and they have too many guys missing, and they do have to cancel a game. Like that could happen.
I mean, it could happen, but I mean, there also is like the flu season. Players miss all the time, right? Like this does happen, and it's not like national news when so and so Patrick Kane has the flu or what have you. You know what I mean? It's like
you have to have more than 4 players, though. I mean, because you play with 19, so if you were carrying 23 and you lost 4, so you'd have to 5. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's a lot. I do have something I wanted to talk about though, real quickly before we get out of here, and that's because I can't go anywhere. I mean, I was at the Florida Flyers game the other night. I've been talking to people. I can't go anywhere right now without hearing Jack Eichel and the St. Louis Blues being mentioned together. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just I talked to some people out there that I really trust and know. I don't know when or if or what is going back, but it feels like I think the reason that you're hearing more about like more people say, well, I think Eichel could get traded sooner than later type things. You're hearing that sometimes now more often because of the Blues. I think there's something going on with the Blues. I really do.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if what was reported on the weekend was floated out there to spur movement, but Elliot Friedman mentioned on Saturday about Pat Brisson sort of running into a wall when it came to Eichel, and that they're going to pursue a grievance with the league.
I think that's coming.
And if that's the case, I see the thing is, and Kevin, again, you'll know a lot more about this than I will. I think the league and the PA are going to be on the Sabres side because it's part of the CBA, unless.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I've read it. I went back and read it again just to make sure I was right on this, but it's pretty ironclad.
Yeah,
it is.
That they get to make the decision, but that doesn't make it morally right.
No.
Or like you said, Kevin, you can't negotiate away your rights. So the question is,
I mean, when you end up, I really do think Tyler Bertuzzi, I wrote this in a column this week, Tyler Bertuzzi and Jack Eichel are, I think, creating sort of a.
Yes, I want to talk about this column, Kevin, because it really got a lot of attention.
Oh yeah, some people were very upset about it. They thought I was attacking Bertuzzi, but I was actually kind of saying that I think guys are fighting for rights. Whether you believe in what Tyler Bertuzzi is standing for or not.
Right.
He's saying, look, I ought to have a say in it. And Jack Eichel is also saying I ought to be able to say that. And those are things that I think will be talked about in the next CBA.
Kevin, this crosses the bounds of sports when you have municipalities throughout the U.S. where police and fire people are walking to the steps of City Hall and basically leaving their boots and saying, I quit, rather than get the vaccine.
Yeah.
Tyler Bertuzzi doesn't have to say I'm retiring because he hasn't gotten the vaccine. He just can't play games in Canada. So at least he gets to play. But the whole thing right now, and in terms of Eichel, I heard it floated. And it's a possibility because it happened when it came to something much bigger than the future of a hockey player. If the NHL and the PA agreed to basically have a one-time exemption on Eichel and say he's allowed to get the surgery, and then that would not set precedent for any future players, because that's what they're always worried about, is setting precedent. Then it would allow Eichel to get the surgery and continue. But the only problem is they would have to decide on who is liable if he can't play the rest of his career. If they have the surgery and he can't play the rest of his career, then does he lose out on $50 million? Does the league pay for it? Does the Sabres?
Insurance, his own insurance, or will pay for it, and then the Sabres will get their insurance to pay their part.
Yeah,
you don't get 70%. You don't get 100%.
Yeah, I talked to a GM on the weekend too. It's all about insurance. The whole thing's about the insurance, and that's what it comes down to, really.
That's why I think the grievance is coming this week or next. I think we're at that.
The grievance is coming also, but and I think the grievance is coming regardless of what I'm saying with the Blues. But also don't eliminate the fact that Brisson is playing a game here too. Like him getting out there through Elliot Friedman is not a mistake. It's not an accident.
No, but he's fighting an uphill battle here.
To what end, though, Eck? What are you saying?
We had Joe Yerdon on last week on here, and we were talking to him, and one of the things he said that was really interesting along with him agreeing with me that the Sabres won't finish in last place. He also said the other interesting thing that he noted in that conversation was that the Sabres in Buffalo are looking worse and worse and worse, and that is starting to affect things. And now attendance is like 7,800, 8,200.
Well,
and at some point here, the Sabres look really bad, and the grievance doesn't help that situation at all.
No,
the grievance immediately makes the Sabres look, because immediately the Sabres look worse again.
But it's a multi-system failure when it comes to the Sabres and the attendance because of a number of reasons. One, they're terrible. Two, the Eichel situation. Three, the Canadian border situation. And four, they prevented somehow apparently they would used to, in previous years, they used to use secondary market like StubHub to sell tickets that they couldn't move. They stopped doing that, so now people who are out there looking for $10 tickets can't
stop doing that because every NHL team was told to not do that anymore, and
they
some teams haven't.
And they refuse to pay full price for a team that's going to finish 31st or 32nd.
Well, because what the NHL wanted is for teams to make deals with specific outlets. Like then I think the Flyers were the first to do like a SeatGeek deal or something like that. To have it so that here's our third party seller that we take, which is interesting because it's like here's our official scalper kind of. But it's but anyway, that's another story. The story I really want to get into, and it's not just about the Sabres attendance. It's about public perception of the Sabres, and Pegula doesn't like to be embarrassed like this, right? And it's getting more embarrassing all the time. So at some point here, the grievance is just another play. I think, that's my answer to your question, Kevin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess that's mostly Rasan is a deal maker. I'm sure he's just trying to get Eichel moved. So if he thinks that's the best way to do it, I guess he would do that.
But. Yeah, but I mean, at this point, he's not in charge of the Sabres like publicly his wife is. I don't think at this point Terry Pegula cares that much about it. I don't.
No, he does. There's no question he does. No, he cares about it. I've bet him a couple times, and he's very passionate about it, and he does not. He took out that team because he wanted to be in hockey. He's not. This is not about him being.
I have said many a time that Terry Pegula bought the Buffalo Bills because they were investment, and bought the Buffalo Sabres because he loved them. And the love of the Sabres is what has crippled them the last 10 years because he loves them so much. He makes bad decisions. That is across the board. Everybody believes that.
He loves him so much, and he has made bad decisions. I don't know if he loves him so much that he makes bad decisions, but I do think he's made bad decisions. And I think that, at the end of the day, this is an entire. Brisson doesn't leave any stone unturned. I talked to a player who was represented by him for a long time about this too, and he says, he just won't. Like if he sees this is a possible thing, he'll throw this out there. He'll throw this out there. He will make. He's turning the heat up. It's the reason Eichel hired him.
I don't think anything he could say right now is going to change Terry Pegula's mind. It's all been said.
Not one thing specifically. If you can't say one specific thing, what do? You try to pile on as much little evidence as you can, and that's what they're doing.
I don't think that's going to work.
I think, and if anything, and maybe I'll be proved completely wrong, the grievance path will slow this thing down even more because I think it'll get legal. It'll get the NHL and the PA on the side of the Sabres. It'll have Eichel and Brisson on the other side. It will grind. And who knows how long it will take?
But they'll set a date, Mike. That's the only thing. It won't be allowed to be in the ether anymore. They'll actually set a date where they're actually going to have to show up and actually have to talk it out in a court of law or wherever they do it, somebody's office. So the fact that there'll be a date set is better than what they've got going on now.
This will never go to court. This is about.
Why do you say that?
Because neither side can afford for this to drag on forever. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for them to like.
None of this makes sense.
Well, I mean, you could try to get an immediate injunction.
You could try that, yes. And
you could try.
That's another play, right? I'm sure all these plays are being looked up at Brisson.
I'll tell you though, it looked pretty ironclad. When you look at it, I don't know what you can draw it on. I mean, it was negotiated, and
you're right. I mean,
Mike said it's try and get precedent set. That's it.
I mean, it seems just so contrary to what we stand for in this country that someone could dictate, your medical position.
Well, all right, but I'm going to look at it from the league and PA's perspective here for a minute. They did this for a reason. Players signed off on it for a reason. Now that somebody big has an injury, it's all of a sudden like, well, but that doesn't mean anything because this is different. But they knew what they were signing, and that is the problem.
The thing that they need with this thing is more than that. And you're right, it's ironclad, but there needs to be some kind of arbitration aspect to this too. That if it gets to a certain point, there's a way of solving it. Because this really is a case by case type situation. It's a law that's put over the entire land by the CBA, but it really is like a case by case because there is a good reason for this at times, but this is not it.
Yeah, but if they made this a case by case act, they would have 20 of these cases a year.
Oh yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I
think a lot more players would speak up.
I think the reason why this is a big deal is normally what's in the player's interest is also in the team's interest.
Right.
So we rarely end up having these sorts of deals.
Right. And I've said it. I said it before, and I'll say it again. This is all stemming from Lou Lamoriello and Jared Cowan with the Leafs a few years back because Cowan went ahead and had the surgery, even though the Leafs said do not. And there was nothing in the CBA to prevent him from doing that. But when the Leafs wanted to buy him out, they were told that they couldn't because Cowan was still injured or still recuperating from surgery. And then after they grieved it and went to an arbitrator, the Leafs were found to be in the right. And by that happening, they had to put it in the new CBA and set a precedent or set parameters, and that's the reason why this is happening. And to the detriment of Jack Eichel, I guess what's going on right now is Jack Eichel is at the point where he absolutely needs a surgery because he's had this herniated disc for months and months on end.
Well, I feel bad. I mean, I have
herniated
discs in my back too, and it's like you wake up every day. I can't imagine what it feels like for the guy.
Oh no, it can't be good. But Tarasenko has complained openly about the surgeries he got.
Right.
He obviously had no say in those surgeries, and he has openly complained about them, and yet he's still playing for the team because there's nothing he can do. He's probably been told by his people, you signed off on this, there's nothing you can do, but he is not happy about it. There's probably a lot of players that aren't happy about it, but because of the way the circumstances are, there's nothing they can do.
So the irony of that name, Russ, is that's name pulling it back to hockey, which is more interesting for people than this legalese stuff, is that, that Tarasenko would be involved in this trade probably. I would imagine Tarasenko would be involved because of the salary cap issues.
Do you think they would take him? I'm not sure they would.
I mean, it's only a couple more years, right, of his contract, and I think they would. It would be a lot. It would be a lot more besides that, but he would be included because it would be.
I only think he would be included in a deal is if the Sabres had found somebody to trade him to almost immediately. Retain salary. And
I'm probably with Mike on that.
It makes no sense for Buffalo to have Tarasenko, who's in his early 30s, who's a Stanley Cup winner. If they were one player away from making a playoff spot, sure.
But this is a case of you have to. In order for St. Louis to give you the most they're going to give you, you have to take the salary of Tarasenko.
Right. And I agree with that point. But what I'm saying is Buffalo wouldn't want him as an asset going forward.
Right.
They would
not an asset for very long, right? This is only 2 more years of this contract?
Right. The race.
They wouldn't want him for 2 games. They would want to flip him.
But you don't want him, but there's this. I mean, you can get great other things. You can get a great amount of picks or prospects or whatever.
Right.
But that you do want. So you take Tarasenko just to make the salaries work.
Well, they might do that over the summer, but the only the rush the Sabres have to do is the fact that he gets a no-move clause that kicks in this year for Jack Eichel. They want to get rid of him before that.
Oh, for sure. And that's another major part of this, right? So that's playing along too.
They still have time even on that.
Let me just finish with this because
I have one more thing actually, Mike.
Okay. Go ahead.
The other thing I heard is that I want to talk about is Dave Manson, who we talked about a little bit.
Josh
Manson. Dave Manson, of course, is his
dad.
His dad, right? They are. I wasn't sure if they were related or not. Anyway, there you go. Josh Manson, perhaps returning to his father's home in Edmonton, and I think the interesting thing about Josh Manson is he's going to be one of the biggest pieces at the trade deadline we talked about, and this is the first kind of trade deadline-ish type thing.
Anaheim has got 3 guys like that. They got Raquel, they've got Lindholm, and they've got Manson. And based on the fact that they're probably not going to be in contention in the Pacific, they're probably going to trade all 3 of them, or at least 2 of them, because I don't know who they're going to sign.
But Manson and Edmonton would be a pretty good, interesting.
Yeah, but I don't know if they have the assets to give that up.
I mean, they're off to an incredible start, obviously.
If I'm Bob Murray, Russ, and I say I want either Broberg or Evan Bouchard, does the phone get hung up in 5?
It gets hung up because Evan Bouchard is already too valuable to the
franchise. We're talking about probably like a first or second round draft pick and something else. We're not talking about
you just said that he's one of the more valuable pieces at the trade deadline.
Right.
A right-hand shot defenseman who's a top 4 guy, you're saying it's going to be player, prospect, pick. It's been that since time immemorial.
Not a Bouchard, not that kind of a prospect.
But
if they give up a first round or a second round pick,
that's
a lot.
The first gambit of every general manager is to ask for an unreasonable price, because you hope that the other general manager is stupid enough to do it. Then you get reasonable.
But honestly, they only have like 3 prospects, and Bouchard's one of them, that you'd be interested in a trade like that. Like Anaheim has much better trading partners than them.
Yeah, if you're not getting Broberg or Dylan Holloway in that deal,
right.
I'm Bob Murray. I'm like,
you walk away.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to give up Broberg. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, just last thing here, because we've talked about it. Corey Schneider has been placed on waivers.
There we go.
Elliot Friedman believes that means Varlamov is ready to step back into the lineup. And they have 5 days off in between their next game, between now and the next game on Saturday against Nashville. Also, my heart breaks a little bit, Russ. Alexander Volkov has been placed on unconditional waivers to terminate his contract, which means he got fed up playing in San Diego, and he's going to play for SKA St. Pierre.
I don't blame him. He's got talent.
Yeah, a lot of talent.
Yep.
Corey Schneider, do you think anybody would pick him up off of waivers?
No, he's going to have a winter home in Bridgeport.
But I just can't believe that just in practices, they're going to let Varlamov play a game out of practices with no camp and nothing else. That just blows my mind that they're going to do that. We'll see if that doesn't change, like if they don't put him on assignment for a few days, because I can't imagine they're not going to get him a start in Bridgeport.
I mean, yeah, you would think they'd have to, but I guess they're not going to. But I think that the reality here is I did hear down at the at Wells Fargo Center on Saturday night, the Flyers were interested in picking up another veteran goalie. And that's why I was curious about, what would they look at? At picking him up?
Yeah, but the problem is Lou will hold him up. Like Lou will want like a 5th round
off pick waivers, off picking him up off of waivers. I mean, he's there on waivers,
Well, yeah, but they're not low enough on waivers. Like somebody else could easily.
You guys just said no one will pick him up.
Well, I mean, we did say that, but it doesn't mean that they won't.
No, but assuming they don't, I mean,
okay.
The reality is, I don't think that many teams would pick him up. I don't think there are many teams in the situation the Flyers are in, which is a contending team without a real.
The only problem is they have 2 young goalies now in Lehigh. Who are you now going to put in Reading and kind of screw up their development? Because now you're not going to have 1 goalie in Reading, you're going to have 2. Like this, I don't know. I can't see them doing that. It just seems like too major of a move just for Schneider.
And I just looked it up. Bridgeport doesn't play their next game until Saturday, which is the same day that the Islanders play against Nashville. So there's no game that he could go to unless they're going to send him to the ECHL.
They could do that.
Yeah,
I mean, they could. The Flyers could keep 3 goalies for a while. They could figure out a way of doing that. That's the other.
They don't know. They can't, because they don't have the cap space to keep 3 goalies. They don't even have the cap space. They have to run a player short when they're home.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just trying. I'm
on the road. It'll be tough.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But they're
interesting. Listen, it'd be interesting.
I mean, if Corey Hart gets hurt, for example, something's going to give, right? And Corey Hart. What am I doing?
I wear my sunglasses at night.
No sleep for me. Carter Hart, thank you very much. Carter Hart, Dave Manson, Charlie Manson. Who knows what we're talking about here?
Wow, I think we're going to end.
My best. Sorry about that. Oh boy. Well, folks. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. And I hope to be here for the entire show tomorrow with a lot more sleep on my hands. We'll talk to you then. Take care, guys.